Hey folks, this is kind of a part two here, what I'm talking about here with frightening music and frightening or scary composers. And all things related there too. And, just like you guys, I'm trying to figure out some of these things still. I gave a fair amount of thought to this a while back, I suppose, but some things, uh, some things I think sink in more with time. Particularly, we're talking about musical harmony because harmony, melody and harmony are so integral to the mood of any piece of music. So again, I mentioned that Scriabin felt like he never wanted to perform the Sonata Number 6 because he felt like it was corrupted by demons. And there's a stigma about it where someone says that you'll have bad luck or something bad things will happen to you if you play this or if it's in your head. And I gotta admit that there's a half step motif. I'm hearing the harmony along with it too as it goes. But there's a half step motif at the beginning of the piece, kind of stays with you, and oh man, is it? I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares. But it's very haunted housey. It's quiet. It's, you guys are gonna have to look it up. It's not a number 6 by Scrabble. There's just no other way of putting it. But it's there's some harmonies that kind of make your skin crawl. I'll put it that way. I mean, and it really is something because most of the time, again, when you're writing music, you, for a lot of different moods, really, it just all depends. But it's just that. Man, harmony really directly affects emotions that you're feeling always in music. I mean, harmony is just, I cannot state that strongly enough. The harmonies that you pick when you're writing a piece of music, man, they're everything. There are other things that affect the mood, sure, but harmony is just, if you have major harmony and it's more tonal, it's functional, oh man, it's people are gonna put a smile on their face. If you have a lot of minor harmony or sevenths or whatever, ninths, it's kind of cool. It's kind of, yeah, it's nice. Sure, maybe it's a little bit emotional, maybe it's romantic, whatever. You start getting into the diminished and augmented ranges and gets a bit more haunted housey and a bit more dissonant, and you feel like, I don't know, kind of, looking a little bit uneasy. And by the time you get to Scrabitz level, everyone's just like wanting to hide under the covers. I mean, it's just really dissonant, but yet it's again, it's the voicing. When you use wider, oh, I don't know. I can talk for a whole video about just Sonata Number 6, just the way it's structured. But just as a quick note here, I should mention, when you have very low bass pitches or contrabass range, whatever, on the piano, and you're using intervals that are closer than a fifth, it's going to sound muddy. The tritone is sitting right in the fence there. Let me rephrase that. Not really. The tritone's quite dissonant, or I should say quite muddy, down low. So, I don't know if Scrabble overuses that too much in the first few octaves of the pedal, per se. I think it's more like a raised fifth. Then he has a tritone above that or something. So he keeps the intervals a little bit wider at the very low end. as far as I can recollect, unless it's not quite super low kind of chord, but it depends, of course, on how long you're holding the chord. But yeah, I know. I guess the super low pitches he keeps 1 octaves, of course, but for the most part. But the voice, I don't know. Again, you're gonna get these different effects with different kinds of harmonies, and there's a question that crosses my mind. So, again, Frank Zappa was trying all these different things, and Frank Zappa. If you guys haven't heard of him, he's a guitarist in the '70s, and he did some classical music that was more dissonant, but yeah, he was after the, um, you know, not the pretty stuff, but the ugly stuff. And he wanted the effect to be just as dissonant and as angry as possible and push the envelope and all this stuff, right? Frank Zappa, sure. So Frank Zappa was trying to probably find all these dark harmonies. Now, if he didn't know as much about Scriabin, I'm certain that he did. I'm certain that he did, but if he didn't, I don't know, because I probably certainly did know about his stuff, but man, of all people, Zappa, I think, was really searching for something darker because, if you guys have read some of his quotes, he said before that there's no harmony that I've ever heard or I can ever play that truly expresses like the rage I have inside me. So it was something very angry sounding, right? It's probably the Vietnam War era, I know, that sort of thing. Yeah, this was maybe I don't know, anti-war stuff, but it was sure, we get angry too about needless wars, of course, too, but um, but I have to ask myself the question again: have we heard the scariest, the darkest stuff from Scriabin? Is Scriabin the limit? We can is it can we can't go any farther than it's not number 6. There's nothing more frightening. Well, I don't know, between Christopher Young's Sinister soundtrack and Lalo Schifrin's unused Exorcist soundtrack and Scriabin's Symphony Number 6. Throw in a few other pieces, man. That's the limits that I've ever heard in terms of the really scary stuff. But there's even including I think Michael J. Lewis's part of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe soundtrack. The chase scene was up there, but that's a bit more about the actually running away from the White Witch. That's more of just adrenaline type of thing, which is a little different than just straight up evil, right? Which is often a little slower kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing too. Is you have to distinguish between chase scenes and fast stuff and just straight up scary stuff, evil sounding stuff. But again, I'm hard pressed to think of something darker than Scriabin. Amongst all the avant-garde stuff I've ever heard, amongst all the scariest, darkest, late romantic stuff, man, but this my gut feeling is that there's still darker stuff that hasn't been done yet. Still darker. And then there's always a question, is there any limit? Well, there's also things like microtonality. Microtonality might, I don't know. I haven't really heard a lot of, we don't have access to microtonal instruments very often. But, my gut feeling is telling me that there's still stuff we haven't heard that is scarier still. So getting back into character and good and evil with all this stuff. By the way, it's kind of raining right now. So, there are folks who are going to say, people are still going to say things like, well, this composer, well, okay, I am of the opinion that Handel was a very good man, a godly man. So there are those composers that just far and away, okay, yeah, these guys are amazing guys. Beethoven, also a very godly man, sure. And the question then again becomes, well, what about the other guys that wrote darker stuff? Are they evil? I mentioned this before. I was like, my gut feeling told me again, as I mentioned before, it has more to do with how sensitive a composer is to not only good things and good feelings, but also dark stuff. And I think to write very frightening music, one needs to have kind of morbid curiosity. I cannot emphasize that enough. A composer needs to have kind of a morbid curiosity for dark harmony. And the stronger that curiosity is, the more they're listening to dark stuff, which is harmonically dark, right? The more they can kind of get into that world a bit more. It takes a heck of a lot of guts at some point. Because, well, you might think, well, it's just dissonance, right? You're just playing dissonances. Well, as I mentioned before, if you have a melody, you have a lot of content, and you kind of are, there's always the question, of course, of crescendo diminuendo, and that gets into strong versus, or increasingly intense emotions versus dying emotions that are dying away, all that stuff. But aside from that, it's where's it going with this? It's kind of well, yeah. It's just if you guys if you're of the opinion that it's wrong to have a morbid or a fearless, we'll say a fearless curiosity. If it's wrong to have a fearless kind of curiosity about dark harmonies that way, then I guess it's not right, in your guys' opinion. But there is no. This is kind of, I don't know, this is an interesting kind of area. There is nothing that I know that forbids someone to write something really dark sounding. There's no commandment saying thou shalt not write scary music, but it's just kind of like when an actor plays a very evil character. I know you guys are thinking, oh, Heath Ledger, the Joker, right? When an actor plays an evil character, the question becomes, what's the impact of writing something very dark on a composer? Well, I know this from personal experience. I can tell you that it's kind of great to be able to immerse yourself in lighter, more constant or happier music after something very dark. But this is more of a mood thing. This is just to put your, and everybody's a little different. There's some folks that don't seem to need to do that. And on some level, we're talking about psychology. And some level, we're talking about something more spiritual. And it's very deep here. But for me, I had to put myself in more of a lighter mode to get away from that darkness after writing some dark music, very scary music. And so that's what Scriabin did. Scriabin wrote the Seventh Sonata after the Sixth because the Seventh Sonata was very not dark. It's supposed to be lighter, happier. And so I'm kind of hinting that Scriabin, again, is much more of a person that was curious, very curious about darker harmonies. and a very, very high intelligence and quick imagination and all this stuff. And I'm not of the opinion that he was a bad person in any way, shape, or form, even if he's not necessarily a Christian or I guess it'd be Orthodox, Russia. But it sounded like again he was more philosophical than he was. But I had to look more to his life and stuff. Maybe he was religious, just not super into the Orthodox faith. Anyway, so there's a question of I guess it just comes back to seeing good and evil in artists and things. And obviously, you guys know when it comes to music what I'm about to say here then. So the classical and film composers rely a lot of times on darker harmonies and also frightening instruments like timpani and drums and scary rhythms and stuff for different effects. And so of course we're talking now about rougher stuff, heavy metal, hard rock, and evil and that stuff. So, and some of you guys have probably watched many videos about the evils of rock music, in particular. And by hard rock, I guess I'm referring more to, by rock I refer more to hard rock and also heavy metal. Because hip hop and rap, to be honest, are kind of not frightening. Not at all. They're just, the thug life. I didn't choose the thug life, that kind of thing, right? It's just, yeah, whatever. But when talking about rock music, I consider rock to be actually music, although it's very again aggressive. There's right off the bat. I mentioned anger. Angry music is rock music, or at least the really loud stuff, where they're going crazy. But sometimes, to be honest, a lot of that stuff isn't just anger. It's just you're just fed up. So it's a kind of anger, but it's not necessarily I'm gonna hurt you anger. It's just I need to let off some steam type of anger. Or sometimes it's something I don't know. Yeah, you're feeling cooped up all day and just cabin fever, and you have a guy that sings, they just are screaming, just like I don't know, that kind of thing. So David Bowie mentioned that you can't tell me that rock music isn't of the devil, right? He's like, oh yeah, rock music is of the devil. There's this whole culture in England, Britain, that had to do with rock music. And you guys are maybe familiar with it, maybe not. And yeah, shall I talk about this for a bit here? Because, I suppose that we're just talking about scary sounding music harmonically. Well, with rock and heavy metal that's darker, supposedly, or just whatever, it's not always harmonically dark. A lot of times, we're talking about music that's in this arena that's more sexually provocative, like the Rolling Stones. Or it's just, it's not 80s happy stuff, at least. 70s darker stuff. Yeah. It's not just in England, but definitely in England. And so, you have, this is in the 70s, you have, after the Beatles, even there's the Rolling Stones, but there's all these other groups that were around back then in the late 60s and 70s and things. I just can't remember a lot of them off the top of my head, but David Bowie is one of them, right? But This is also the era of Jimmy Savile, which, you know, like, wow. I mean, in all honesty, when it comes to dark sounding stuff, we think, Norway death metal, right? Sure, I guess. Drinking horn or blood but honestly, that's kind of just like a getting out your pent up aggression or whatever. It's not necessarily, to me, it doesn't always feel very evil sounding. And so again, I'll mention this to anybody. I've seen some of these videos of heavy metal guys, death metal guys. And, oh, I don't know these groups. Oh man, they're so evil. Mayhem or Gorgoroth or I'm not trying to put them down. I'm just saying a lot of times it's just pent up aggression, and they put on a good show, and they drink pig's blood, or I don't know what they do. Marilyn Manson is a little bit more artsy about it, but essentially it's kind of the same deal, kind of. Oh, I know I've heard of the crazy stuff he's done, like poop on a Book of Mormon and stuff. I can't say a lot of what he's done is. I mean, he does seem a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Right. But again, we're not talking about Lester Crowley level evil. Not even remotely. I mean, again, just in case you guys are wondering about the subject, Marilyn Manson, I know where he's at in terms of good and evil. Worse than him, even, was somewhat, was LaVey. Not all that much worse. And then you jump down quite a ways, and then a little ways more. Eventually, you get to Lester Crowley's level, and then Savile is pretty close to Crowley. Crowley and Savile are disgusting human beings. LaVey was pretty messed up, but not even remotely as bad as those two. And Marilyn Manson is got a sick imagination somewhat, but yeah, I know. He's just, again, just. But I'm not saying he's a especially godly man, not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying there are limits, right? If Johnny Depp is his best friend, one of his best friends, Depp is, whatever. But seriously though, like you're like, well, okay, so Manson has his limits. Some things that Manson would never do either on a rock stage or real life or whatever. I don't know, but so much of what makes rock music supposedly, or actually dark or evil sounding, has to do with the lyrics, right? Of course, but there's also something, and this is getting back to the Rolling Stones, and also more especially blues and the 50s kind of earlier stuff, leading into the 60s. Darn, I can't remember his name. It's not Chuck Berry, not that guy. I don't know. There's some of these guys that influenced the Rolling Stones, and they were kind of bluesy guitarists. They were black, some of them. And the funny thing about blues music is that, I mentioned that the tritone. Well, the tritone is the darker thing, much more than the diminished triad, and also mentioned the whole tone scale can be quite dark, and it's very alien or just the otherworldly kind of thing going on with the whole tone scale. But there's other scales that are kind of dark. There's like the harmonic minor scale, but sometimes you start getting more into the Middle Eastern or old world sound rather than something scary. So the same deal with modes like the Phrygian mode. There's flat second things going on, which can sound scary in their own right, but they can also sound Egyptian or something. I don't know. So anyway, but yeah, what makes a lot of rock music kind of dark is the lyrics, and again how you're singing. If you're singing "All We Are Is Just Another Brick in the Wall," the reason why it's a little bit scary sounding is because it's like, especially if they're just kind of marching along and just kind of, oh, another brick, and then the wall. If it's just kind of, it's just kind of really gloomy sounding, then yeah, that's dark. But it's I don't know. There's just a lot of different angles to this whole thing, and but it's a different kind of darkness. It's a different kind of evil, supposedly you could say, than the if you just have something that's purely instrumental, just a purely instrumental kind of deal going on. Well, then you have to really rely on that dissonance and sound effects, timpani, to really give it that, you know, evil sounding edge. But if you're talking about music with lyrics, and you already have loud guitars and drums, well, sure, I mean. But the other thing too is that there's some things that you can do that are always, you hear them all the time in scary movies, like pitch bends and all these string effects. And I'm just, I don't, yes, it makes it sound scary, yes, but all that sound effect stuff, it's just kind of, to me, it still ought to be kind of like the cherry on top of a piece of music that's hopefully very effective, just involving its dark harmonies and melodies and stuff. So, I mean, there's other music I've written that's very scary sounding, and honestly, like the biggest thing that any composer could do to write music that more like this stuff is, again, you don't have to, you shouldn't be you don't, it doesn't involve being a bad person, right? But a lot of it has to do with needing to have a curiosity for dark harmony and for being kind of brave. Because when you're writing music that the more frightening the music is, you have to be brave. You have to, it takes a lot of courage to write music that would freak someone out just from hearing it. Because you see what I'm saying, right? So it doesn't really equate to being an evil person. I guess, but that being said, there's also the I've heard, I guess there's an episode of The Haunting once where it involved a man who was playing the piano late at night, and he was just almost like possessed by some evil being, and so he started playing all these really dark, these really, really evil sounding music, and the house is cold, and everybody's huddled in the corner. It was a very frightening, darker episode of The Haunting, in particular, I think. But you hear about these isolated incidents, and that it's not very common when that happens. Vast majority of the time, 99% of the time, you're talking about somebody that writes scary stuff, is really pretty fearless when it comes to that stuff. Some people just don't have any desire to do that stuff whatsoever. It's like they just avoid anything that's scary because it's scary. Because why? Why be scared, kind of thing. And some people will always see whole this whole thing in a very moral, good and evil kind of light, and I guess the thing is that it's important also to realize that there's a lot of different moods talking about here. There's not just one. There really are countless different moods. So there's always room for music that hasn't been heard before, that kind of explores certain moods pretty well. That might be dark, but it might necessarily be, um, you know, evil or demonic or wicked or something. You know, you can feel spiritually worse for having listened to it. But there is music that can kind of pull you down a bit, and there's, I don't know. Again, when push comes to shove, I'm still of the opinion that, um, well, the worst music I've ever heard, so Scriabin takes the cake for the classical stuff. maybe Christopher Young or Lila Schifrin for film stuff. But it's a different kind of evil with rock stuff. And I gotta tell you, the Rolling Stones, pretty despicable guys, at least Mick Jagger. And so sometimes you feel that sliminess when you hear their music. So, again, it's a different kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. It's not that their music sounds super dark, it's just the lyrics, right? They have sympathy for the devil. I mean, come on now. Well, that's just a fun song. Really? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, just some more thoughts for you guys. Leave me thoughts and comments below. Catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.